So have you ever wondered how your credit limit compares to other people your age? Well, you don't have to wonder that anymore because we're going to break down by age group here in the US what the average credit limits are, and not only that, but then also how to boost your credit score to then increase that overall credit limit. Because as you may or may not know, one of the biggest factors that determines your credit score is your credit utilization. So the higher your credit limit is, the easier it is to keep that credit utilization lower, which means you get approved for much more credit cards long term to be able to do this travel points and miles thing. So without further ado, let's see where you stand compared to the rest when it comes to credit limits. So most of the information that we're going to talk about here comes from Experian as well as Bankrate.com, which has a great article which I'll link down below, which breaks this down very easily and where I got most of this information from. And then after we talk about what these limits are on a per kind of age basis, I'll let you guys know from a data point perspective how old I am and what my current credit limit is and what my utilization is as well across all my personal credit cards. So to get started with this one, I do want to talk about the overall average. As of the third quarter of 2023, the average American credit limit for everybody here in the US was $29,855, which is again roughly $30,000, with the average credit usage being about $6,500. So it does keep that credit utilization relatively low, sub 30%, around 22% overall, which is in that good standing. Again, according to what's good when it comes to credit utilization, you want to keep it between 10 and 30%, but I will advise you to keep it between maybe 5 to 10% or even lower, because I have noticed from personal experience, the lower it is, even if it's at 0, the better your credit score is going to be. But there are some pushing and pulling games that you have to play, which we'll touch on at the end of this video. So now let's break this down by age. So let's start off with Gen Z, which is anybody that's around 18 to 26 years old, which I personally don't fall into that category, but the average credit limit at that age is around $12,899, which is about a 14% increase year over year. So what that means is that accumulation across all of your credit cards, you have almost $13,000 of a credit limit in order to utilize. So if you want to keep that at around 10%, you're going to want to be spending $1,300 on that credit in terms of utilizing it compared to your entire credit limit. So keep that under $1,300 if you can in order to stay below 10% to really maximize what your credit score is going to be, because again, credit utilization is one of the main, if not the main factor, second to paying everything off on time in terms of determining what your credit score is going to be. So now let's get into the Millennials, which is going to be anybody from the age of 27 to 42, and the average credit limit there is going to be $27,533, which is more than double what Gen Z has, which is kind of cool to see. So you see that over time it will increase as long as you continue to have a good credit score, and it increases in multiple facets. You can increase it by getting more cards, which increases your overall credit limit, or you can even call up your bank and ask for a credit increase for each individual card, which I've done so in the past, which is always great to see. So the higher your credit limit, again, is usually a good thing. Again, if you're disciplined and you know what you're doing with your spending and you're able to control yourself, the higher the credit limit, the better, because it means you're able to keep your credit utilization even lower without trying as hard to do so. So now we get into Generation X, which is anybody between the ages of 43 and 58 years old, giving you a credit limit or average credit limit of about $38,665. So again, we continue to increase with Generation X because again, they have a little bit more money. This is kind of the peak earning period of your lifetime. Around 35 to 50 years old is when you're earning the most amount of money, meaning you probably have the most amount of credit cards, meaning you probably have the most amount of credit limit to be able to pay that off in time. Again, keep everything as disciplined as possible. Pay everything the moment that you're able to pay it. Don't let anything carry over from a statement perspective, because that's when you get yourself into a lot of trouble when it comes to this. So keep your credit utilization low. And if you want to keep your credit utilization at about 10%, you're going to want to have less than $4,000 of credit utilization against that $38,000 of credit limit to keep you at around 11 to 10%. So now let's get into the baby boomer section, which is going to be anybody between 59 and 77 years old. And here you're going to see a big slowdown in terms of the rate of credit limit increases. Here, you're at about $41,906, which is only about a $2,000 or $3,000 increase compared to the previous generation. Because again, at this point, some of these people are living off of their savings, some of these people are living off of their retirement. So your income isn't going to increase anymore, meaning that banks are going to reel it in a little bit because your income isn't increasing, meaning that the banks probably don't think that you need a higher credit limit. So again, to keep this at about 10% or lower, don't be spending more than $4,200 on your credit utilization, because again, your credit limit is around almost $42,000. And then you have the silent generation, which is anybody over the age of 78, and this is actually the first time that we see a credit limit decrease overall comparative to the age gaps that we've been dealing with. So now you're down to $32,812, which is very interesting because, like I mentioned, most people this age are living off of retirement. Most people this age are maybe getting aid from other family members or aid from the government with Social Security and things of that nature. So your credit income and your overall income increases aren't going to be increasing anymore, or at least on average, it won't be increasing anymore because again, you're living off of your hard-earned money that you earned when you were earning that money between the ages of 18 and let's say 55. And now before we talk about my personal data points, I do want to mention that Bankrate does also have it based on a per state basis. So as of right now, the biggest average when it comes to credit limit by state is going to be New Jersey, which funny enough is my current state. And the average credit score in New Jersey is 714 points, which is again kind of high in my opinion because I've seen much lower. And then when it comes to the state that has the lowest credit limit on average by its citizens, it's going to be Mississippi at $21,676 with an average FICO score of 667, which is something to take into consideration. Again, these are just data points that I'm sharing, which I thought was kind of curious and good to know. And then when it comes to my personal use cases, I'm 31, so again, I fit into that millennial period, and my overall credit limit on my personal card, because I have a bunch of business cards as well, which don't correlate to your personal credit limit, is around $70,000 on a credit limit. And for me, I keep my credit utilization between 1% and 3% at all times because that is what I've seen to help me maximize not only my credit score, but then also allow me to still get increased credit limits overall over time because I'm still showing banks that I am spending money on these cards, but I'm also showing banks that I'm very responsible with my spending. So now, again, these are just averages, so let me know how you guys compare according to your age group and your age bracket. I'm always curious to know if it's lower, if it's higher, because again, at the end of the day, as long as you're disciplined with your money, having a low credit limit isn't necessarily a bad thing, and having a high credit limit is also not always a good thing, because like I mentioned, people can start to get undisciplined with their money, so if you have a $100,000 credit limit, and you start to spend on it like crazy, your credit score will begin to decrease because let's say you have $80,000 or $90,000 utilized of the $100,000, that credit limit is going to be huge. But at the same light, if you have a lower credit limit, let's say $500 or $1,000, as long as you pay everything off on time and you're good with your money and you're disciplined, that can still translate to a low credit utilization, so it's all about the ratios and the numbers. But again, people with a higher credit limit are at a little bit of an advantage because let's say if you spend $1,000 and you have a $100,000 credit limit, you only have a 1% credit utilization. But if you only have $5,000 in credit limit and you spend $1,000, that automatically puts you at 20%, which is a little bit of a disadvantage because at the end of the day, you're still only spending $1,000, which is the same $1,000 that the other person spent with a higher credit limit. So you got to learn to play that game a little bit to be able to increase it. So now some quick tips and tricks in order to quickly increase your credit limit. The number one criteria is going to be to make your payments on time every single month or even earlier. I like to pay my credit card pretty much every single week to make sure that I'm on top of it and so that number doesn't balloon up and psychologically it stays relatively low. So do keep that in mind, make your payments on time and you'll be rewarded very quickly. Secondly, is going to be to keep that credit utilization low. Like I mentioned, it does say between 10 and 30% is going to be good enough to have a high credit score or good credit utilization. I highly recommend staying below 5% if you can. You still don't want to be at 0 because banks will start to notice that, and then maybe depending on when your statements are, banks start to think in their automated systems that you're not even using the credit, so why give this person a credit? So overall, I do recommend having some spend on it, but A, don't let the balance carry over, and B, make sure it's between 1 to 5%, but feel free to play with it as you see fit. Maybe 1 month put it at 3%, 1 month put it at 7, another month put it at 1. As long as you're disciplined and you can manipulate your own credit utilization, you'll learn for yourself exactly how your credit score reacts to your credit utilization. And the last quick tip that I will give if you do already have some credit cards is give your credit card providers some calls and see if you can increase your credit limit. If you're in good standing with them, if you have your credit utilization already relatively low, you will be able to increase your credit limit by as much as you would really want to, as long as you request it. Some of them you can give them a call, some of them you can do it directly through their portal. So I definitely recommend maybe going through each of your credit cards because worst case scenario, they just say no. Best case scenario, they increase your credit limit, which will decrease your utilization overall. So that will just about do it for this video. I just thought this was very interesting because I see a lot of those videos of how your net worth compares to your age bracket and your age group, and I was curious to know how your credit limits compare as well, and if even that was data that was collected, because apparently it is, and it's very curious to see exactly what the averages are, what state has the highest, which state has the lowest, which age group has the highest, and it's also interesting to see how the credit limit decreases over time because again, you're living off of retirement at a more static income versus kind of in your prime years of earning where that income does increase year over year, at least ideally. But that'll do it for this video. Let me know in the comment down below where you fall in your age group, how you compare to the averages. Are you higher? Are you lower? Does it help you build confidence? Does it not help you build confidence? But just know, keep your credit utilization low, make your payments on time, and that's going to be 70% of what determines your credit score, which ideally will eventually increase everything like I mentioned. But that'll do it, everybody. If you made it to the end, leave a little dolphin. And if you guys want to watch more videos like this one, definitely check out one of these videos right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando, and I'm out of here, everybody. Peace.